By early 1943, following the catastrophic defeat at Stalingrad, the German High Command was bleeding momentum. They needed a decisive victory to stabilize the Eastern Front and regain the strategic upper hand. Right in the center, the Soviet line pushed westward into a massive salient around Kursk, exposed on three sides. Germany's plan, Operation Citadel, relied on a textbook pincer movement. Striking from the north and south, they'd trap the Soviet armies inside. To execute this, Germany concentrated nearly 3,000 tanks and assault guns. It was an all-or-nothing gamble to shatter Soviet resistance and permanently win the war in the east. The same geography that drew the German High Command to Kursk created an inherent risk. The terrain dictated exactly where the panzers had to strike. Soviet intelligence didn't have to guess. Supplied by a network of spies and British codebreakers, Soviet commanders knew the exact assembly points, the scale of the forces involved, and the planned timeline for the German strikes. Rather than retreating to straighten their defensive lines and avoid the trap, the Soviet High Command stayed inside the bulge, choosing to absorb the massive armored blow and grind the German panzers to dust. This intelligence advantage allowed the Soviets to build a massive, layered trap directly in the path of the German advance. Germany delayed the launch of Operation Citadel for weeks. They were waiting on the production and delivery of new armor, specifically their Panther and Tiger tanks, banking on heavy frontal plating and massive firepower to guarantee a breakthrough. That delay proved lethal. It handed the Red Army the exact window of time they needed to build their fortifications. This cross-section diagram shows their strategy: defense in depth. Instead of concentrating their forces on a single, brittle front line, the Soviets built multiple, sequential zones of fortification, stretching dozens of miles deep into their own territory. They seeded the earth with millions of landmines. They carved out sprawling anti-tank ditches, deep enough to swallow armored vehicles whole, funneling any surviving tanks directly into disguised artillery kill zones. Germany's obsession with waiting for technological superiority gave their enemy the time to build a mechanical engine that made that technology irrelevant. When the German attack finally launched on July 5th, the friction was immediate. Elite panzer divisions drove straight into the densely packed minefields and bogged down under heavy fire. The layered defenses functioned exactly as designed. The Germans expected to punch through the Soviet lines in a matter of hours. Instead, they spent days fighting for single miles. In the south, German forces managed to push deeper. By July 12th, desperate to salvage a breakthrough, they concentrated their remaining offensive power toward the small town of Prokhorovka. Hundreds of tanks from both sides collided in a chaotic point-blank brawl across the fields. The fighting was savage, with burning wrecks littering the steppes by nightfall, bleeding the last of the German offensive momentum dry. Historians still debate the exact kill counts and tactical victor at Prokhorovka, but the strategic reality was undeniable. The German advance was completely and permanently stalled. The cost of that stalled advance was irreplaceable. Germany had sacrificed its most elite units and thousands of highly trained crewmen, achieving no strategic breakthrough whatsoever. Then an external shock struck. On the exact same day tanks clashed at Prokhorovka, Allied forces waded ashore in Sicily. Suddenly facing a new threat in the Mediterranean, Hitler was forced to abruptly divert critical armor and air support westward. Operation Citadel was terminated. The Red Army didn't hesitate. Within days of absorbing the attack, Soviet forces launched massive, sweeping counteroffensives of their own, crashing into the depleted German lines. The Kursk defenses absorbed the German momentum and launched the Red Army forward, permanently transferring the strategic initiative to the Soviets. Looking back at the early years of the war, German armored columns had dictated the pace of the fighting. After Kursk, Germany would never possess the strength or resources to mount a strategic attack on the Eastern Front again. The High Command took their finest remaining units, drove them into a heavily fortified trap they had months of warning about, and lost decisively. From the dust of those wheat fields onward, the war in the East ceased to be a back-and-forth struggle. It became a relentless, one-way retreat all the way back to Berlin.